Okay. So Amos chapter 6 is where we're going to be. When I read the beginning of Amos 6, well, let's just read it, and I want to see like what kinds of thoughts you have as you read the beginning of this book. What comes to your mind? What are the impressions you get? What do you see anything in your imagination? What do you hear? What kind of happens in your heart, in your mind as we read this? Just what are your impressions? Amos chapter 6, verse 1. Woe to you who are complacent in Zion, and you who feel secure on Mount Samaria, you notable men of the foremost nation, to whom the people of Israel come. Go to Calneh and look at it. Then go down and go there. Go to Calneh and look at it. Go from there to Great Hamath, and then go down to Gath and Philistia. Are they better off than your two kingdoms? Is their land larger than yours? So let's pause there. What do you see? What do you think as you read these verses? What comes to mind? Anything in particular? I'm not looking for a specific answer. I'm just curious as to what you think about it.
They're being chastised for being complacent.
Okay, chastisement for being complacent. Complacent how? In what are they complacent? There's a lot of ways we can be complacent.
Following what God asked them to do.
Okay. What's made them complacent?
I think with the thought of thinking that they were okay. And sometimes when we at least start out on the good foot and we grow complacent, we think we're doing what's right or being the way we should be.
Okay. Alan said prosperity. Colette said, things are things seem as they should be. And so they have gotten complacent in some way.
I think, Patrick, that they feel that they're secure.
Where is the security coming from?
Well, they feel like their lifestyle, their wealth, and all of these different things make them feel that they don't need God.
Okay. I think that line, the third line down, you notable men of the foremost nation. Well, why wouldn't you feel secure and complacent if you're the notable people of the foremost nation, right? Why would you not feel like you got it made, right? You're citizens of the foremost nation, and you're the notable people in that foremost nation. Man, no wonder things are good, right? No wonder all's well. How do you think Amos meant that, or God through Amos, when he said, "You notable men of the foremost nation"?
Sarcastic.
Yeah, I don't think God is averse to sarcasm sometimes, and I think that's what you have here. I think this is a sarcastic statement. Oh, you notable people of the foremost nation, you've got it made. All is well for you. You're complacent. We've seen some of the evidence of complacency, right? Back in chapter 4, we had the women telling their husbands, "Bring us some drinks." we had this sort of sense of comfort. We had the prosperity that comes inevitably when there is inequity and injustice. Injustice and inequity happen so often because they are profitable for some people, right? And so with this inequity and injustice, there are folks making money. There are folks doing really well. And so there's this sense that everything is great for me. Everything is great for me and mine. So why do I care about anything else? Because that's kind of what complacency suggests to me, right? Complacency is, I don't have to do anything. There's no responsibility here. There's no burden on me. All I have to do is sit back and enjoy my security and my peace and my prosperity. This can be a temptation, right? This can be a struggle. We live in some ways a foremost nation, or at least we tend to think we are, right? We are people who are part of a prosperous nation still, despite our problems and despite the struggles, still a prosperous nation for some of us, right? Not for all of us, but for some of us. And so, I mean, it can be easy to kind of lock into this sense of just going along and enjoying what we have and not worrying too much about anything else.
I think we feel like that we deserve it, and we don't feel like we need to make any more of an effort. We've done what we need to get here. We're in a good place. We deserve it. Let it stay on this way, status quo.
We sort of grow up with that sort of assumption, don't we? I think, or at least I did, this sort of assumption that you do the things you're supposed to do and you work hard and you'll earn these things and you'll be comfortable and you'll be at peace and all will be well. And so, I mean, I think we kind of do get this sense that what we have, we're entitled to. We deserve it in some way. And, from a certain point of view, that's not wrong. And that's not really the issue totally here, is it? The issue is they have this stuff, and now there's no sense that they have to do anything about any of the problems that the Lord is calling them to address. That's what this is. This book is about, hey, look, things aren't as good as you think they are. Maybe prosperous for some of you, but some of you are being ground into the dust. Some of you are not having the things that they need. Some of you are going hungry. Some of you have been cheated. Some of you are not getting justice in the courts. And things need to change. And there is a responsibility that God sort of places on all of his people here to make sure that happens. And so that's why he says, woe to you when you're complacent. Interestingly, he mentions Zion and Mount Samaria. Amos, of course, was from the south, the southern kingdom, what we usually know of as Judah. Zion is the hill on which Jerusalem sits. So often when you refer to Zion, what you mean is Jerusalem. So this chapter starts with sort of an indictment of not just the northern kingdom that Amos has come to give a message, so the southern kingdom that it has the capital in Jerusalem. And they mentioned three other kingdoms, Calneh and Hamath and Gath. This is probably the kinds of things they would be saying about their kingdoms. Look at these other great kingdoms. They're not any better than we are. These other great kingdoms, we're equal to them. They're no better than us. They're proud of their prosperity. They're proud of what they have. And so somebody, if you would, read 3 through 7.
You push away every thought of coming disaster, but your actions only bring the day of judgment closer. How terrible for you who sprawl on ivory beds and lounge on your couches, eating the meat of tender lambs from the flock and of choice calves fattened in the stall. You sing trivial songs to the sound of the harp and fancy yourselves to be great musicians like David. You drink wine by the bowlful and perfume yourselves with fragrant lotions. You care nothing about the ruin of your nation. Therefore, you will be the first to be led away as captives. Suddenly, all your parties will end.
So,
is that where you want me to stop at? 7?
Mm-hmm. That's great. So yeah, this is sort of the form their complacency is taking, right? Verse 3, you put off the day of disaster, bring near a reign of terror. What is that? What do they mean by that? What does the text mean by that? What's the day of disaster?
When God brings judgment.
Okay, when God brings judgment. So what they're doing, put off, actually is kind of probably not a great translation here, because that makes it sound like they have some control over it. I think what they mean is, you're not dealing with the fact that judgment's coming. You keep holding that at arm's length. You keep pushing that off. And what's happening is you're bringing closer and closer this reign of terror that's coming when the Assyrians come and take over. Not dealing with the sin among them, not repenting, not seeking God and living like he wants them to, is just bringing closer this day of reckoning that's coming. And they're going to have to deal with that at some point or the other. So life is good, right? They're lying on their beds adorned with, they've got their beds with ivory inlay, and their couches, and they're eating the best, the choice lambs, the fattened calves. Life is good, right? They've got the nice furniture and the nice homes and the best food, and they're I like that line. You strum away on your harps like David. You improvise on musical instruments. There's actually some question about how to translate those two lines, but the idea seems to be, you guys think you're David, singing your songs and making it seem like you're, at the height of prosperity. You drink wine by the bowlful. You use the finest lotions, but you don't grieve over the religious. Actually, the word for feasting in verse 7 is a word that's not used much in the Old Testament, but you see it outside the Old Testament in ancient Near Eastern literature. It's a funeral meal. It's sort of kind of what we call what we do when after a funeral, everybody gets together and you have a meal. Same thing in the ancient Near East, except it was often very celebratory, and it was great food, and so so what you have is this irony. You have this funeral meal where people are enjoying themselves while they're grieving over a lost loved one or family member, remembering that person. But what they're not grieving over is the slow death of the kingdom and the nation because of the way they're living.
As it happened, I was reading a commentary today, and it said something that might be applicable. The writer says, "The sinner who is afraid to pray to God, who tries to deny God in his heart, is perhaps closer to confessing God than the sinner who stands before God proud of his sin because he thinks it's a virtue. The former is more honest than he thinks, for he acknowledges the truth of his own state, confesses that he and God are not at peace with one another. The latter is not only a liar himself, but tries to make God a liar also by calling upon him to approve of his own lie. Such was the Pharisee in the parable, the holy man who practiced many virtues, but who lied before God because he thought his piety made him better than other men." Sort of interesting idea of when you try to deny your sinfulness and then try to rope God into somehow endorsing that, you're really further from God than somebody who's very aware of their problems, but for whatever reason just doesn't feel like they can turn to God for them. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's really applicable, and I think that's probably what's happening here. I mean, we've already seen from last week, right? You know, I don't want your sacrifices. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in you seeking to change and to care about the things I care about and to build the kind of society I want to see. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting, and we do that. We can so easily justify ourselves and get complacent and get the feeling like, well, things must be going pretty well because look at the way life is. Look at how things are progressing, and we can easily lose sight of. I mean, what makes us successful, right? What is it that makes us successful people? And we so easily sort of slip into measuring success by, you know, where you live, what you eat, and and what you put on, and the measures by which most of the people around us sort of gauge success.
Well, and I mean, you talked about prosperity. I mean, prosperity is sort of a double-edged sword. I mean, even if you're the most faithful of Christians and have a great relationship with God and view what you've been given and confess those as blessings, at the same time, doesn't that relationship with God also cause you to ask, what does God want me to do with this stuff? And so, I mean, it's in some ways it's a blessing. In some ways, it could be an accusation that to those who have much has been given, much may be requested. You know, it's not it's a blessing, but it may be a mixed blessing because you have more responsibility now, maybe, to deal with that. And these people don't seem to get that other side of the blessing or the prosperity equation.
The complacency, right? That first line, the woe to you who are complacent in Zion.
Patrick, I'm not sure who may have seen the Hunger Games, but when I was reading this, it reminded me a lot of the Capitol versus the districts in the Hunger Games, where at the Capitol they were taking all of the resources of the district and celebrating with parties and eating and drinking and taking pills so they could throw up and eat more while they're starving out in the districts, and just the hypocrisy and the disdain of that for anybody that watches it and seeing it. And that's kind of what I see when they're in this. I mean, they're just reveling in what they have with no care for those who need it, you know? Right.
Yeah. I think that's really good. I'd forgotten about that. I don't think I ever read the Hunger Games, but I did see some of the movies. And yeah, you're right. I mean, and that comes out in a lot of different places and a lot of different ways, that contrast between the haves and the have-nots, and how that gap can easily widen, and maybe widens more easily than it closes. I don't think it naturally closes very easily. It widens naturally if you just kind of leave things as they are.
And you know,
I was thinking about let me just throw this in. I was thinking about the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and the really vivid picture of Lazarus laying at this guy's gate and begging for a crumb from his table and not receiving anything. Go ahead, Colette.
Yeah, I was thinking the kind of a converse to that of not necessarily being wealthy or having your ivory beds or any of those things, but more a self-indulgence. Yes. And that any of us can be so self-occupied that woe to us, because that's what I pick up, is that they're so comfortable in whatever they have, whatever gives them purpose and meaning for their own appetites. And it's a woe to them. And so you don't have to be wealthy or have much or to be self-centered and take in the pleasures that meet your needs. And so that's just a little bit different looking through the lens of where I live, because I'm not wealthy. I am wealthy compared to other people and places, but in a more practical way, if I'm just focused on self, I think this speaks to me more intensely.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I do. I do think that often wealth is the vector by which that self-indulgence comes, but it doesn't take a lot of wealth to become pretty self-indulgent. But I do think you're right. I think we can be, that self-indulgence is a good term. We can be people who are just sort of turned in on ourselves, to use C.S. Lewis's picture. We're just people. We can be people who are just turned in on ourselves so much that nothing else penetrates. Nothing else seems to strike a nerve and wake us up. And you know, I don't think anybody intends that to happen. That's the thing. That's the sort of scary thing about this. I don't think we go out intending to be that, but through experience and through life and through, you know, the things that happen, we can so easily become that, and we sort of protect ourselves by becoming kind of cynical and jaded and you know, and just I mean, I think of how often I see somebody on the street, you know, wanting some money, and how easily I can think of reasons not to give. You know, and that's not obviously the only way to help, but how often I can sort of think of reasons not to help, and how often I wonder if that, in my case, is coming from this complacency, this place of self-centeredness and self-indulgence.
Well, another way of looking at it is going back to a theme that we talked about in the past too, was these people seem to feel secure. And that's a perennial issue with Christians too, that either through wealth or where you live or your country, your citizen, we cling to things and try to build security on those things. But many of us find that events happen that just blow that security just sky high. And that's why, you know, a lot of the people who talk about prayer say the thing that draws you to prayer is a realization of your own helplessness, and that you have to rely on God. That's the only place to build security on. And these people aren't doing that. They don't have that sense of helplessness, though we know they really are whistling before the, you know, in front of disaster, right? You know, that they should feel like they are going to be tossed to the winds, because there's evidence all around them, and they're in denial. And but before we criticize them too much, I mean, even the people who are great writers on prayer talk about how for most of us that's a cyclical thing, that we at times feel that sense of helplessness, and then we start feeling a little bit more secure based on events, and then something comes and jolts us and makes us aware once again that we have to rely on God. So it's an easy thing, it is. to fall prey to.
It really is, and that's one of the dangers in the prophets, I think, is to read it and go, well, those people should have known better. You know, they got what was coming to them. You know, what's the next chapter say? And instead of sort of letting it wash over us a little bit and sitting with it a little bit, like we're doing, and sort of turning it over and considering what are some of the easy tendencies that human beings have that we can see from this, and see also, because I do think there's a tendency to be self-reliant and self-centered and self-absorbed. and forget where our blessings come from and the responsibility that comes with it. I think it's really interesting, the things we're talking about, verse 8. The sovereign Lord has sworn by himself. Ask me another time if you want to why it's interesting that God swears by himself. Anyway, the sovereign Lord has sworn by himself. The Lord God Almighty declares, I abhor the pride of Jacob and detest his fortresses. Fortresses might just be houses, big houses. It may also have to do military security, battlements, that sort of thing. But I abhor the pride of Jacob. I don't think the Bible talks a lot about God abhorring things. I mean, that's a strong word, right? There are just a few things that make that list. And pride seems to be one of them. The kind of pride, at least, that sets ourselves up as the source of all security and all strength, and lets us easily forget that we need God, that we're dependent upon him. And the things we take pride in, those things disgust God. Not because of the things themselves, but because we take pride in it, because we put our trust in those things when we should be putting our trust in God. So it makes me want to think about, all right, you know, if you take out that name Jacob and put in my name, you know, Patrick, what are the things that God abhors? What are the things that he despises? What am I taking pride in? And sort of, for me, brings this book kind of home a little bit. Anybody have thoughts about verse 8 or anything else?
That was just what keeps pounding in my head is the thought of familiarity that lulls us into this false sense of security. And I'll say a little bit more. I was talking to a client that just moved to another state, and she's like, I'm just losing it. My anxiety is through the roof. And I said, talk to me more about that. Tell me, what do you mean? And she says, there's nothing familiar. She says, I know no one. I'm just out of my comfort zone. And as you're talking and everybody's sharing tonight, I just thought about, yeah, our familiarity really does breed this false sense of security. And that lulls us into this self-sufficiency, that lulls us into this complacency, because everything's here. And probably like you, I can walk through my house with my eyes closed and probably get to room because I'm so familiar. I know it like the back of my hand. And so, and I think Jacob's sin, in Colette's sin, is that refusal to change, the refusal to be uncomfortable, or to put myself in an unfamiliar spot, even something to like coming and doing a food pantry. Or I shared maybe a month or so about my TA praying for the first time, just the uncomfortability in that she was willing to write out her prayer and then read it because we pray in class. And so just the willingness to change, even though it was very uncomfortable. And so I think that makes me think about Jacob. And like you said, put my name in there. Where and how am I willing to feel uncomfortable? To the glory of God, of course, not just to be a model, but
right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good question to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what you need is that event that rattles the walls, right? and
like a pandemic.
Like a pandemic, maybe.
Yes.
Where suddenly,
right on up.
Oh, you like your house? Well, how will you like it for a year and a half? And this sort of sense that that maybe maybe as human beings, not that we want them, but maybe we need those events from time to time. We need to be shaken. We need to be, and That's kind of what this day of the Lord is, though. In this case, it's pretty severe, right? It's going to be literally a world-shattering event for Israel. But we need some days like that where something shakes us out of our sense of security and complacency.
Well, that's
hopefully we can cultivate the kind of relationship with God where, all we need is a gentle reminder from time to time. In Israel's case here, they needed more than that. I think I stepped on somebody. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's why that in Thou Fount of Every Blessing, digging out that idea of Ebenezer, that the Israelites created an altar, right? And the significance of the altar was to memorialize that we've crossed into the promised land, hither to this place, by thy help I've come. And it wasn't of their doing, right? And all of our homes, anything that we built up really needs to be looked at as Ebenezer, that it's not something that we merited, right? And then but rather it's something that God has allowed us to have or given us. That puts it in perspective. It also sets us up, as like Corrie ten Boom says, to hold it lightly, because it may, God may want us to release it. It might be taken from me because it's not really mine. It's something that God has lent to me up till now. So
it'll hurt less if we hold it lightly.
Right. That's what she said. That's what she said.
Right. And this is hard because nobody wants this kind of terrible event that Israel's facing. Nobody wants trauma in our lives. And so maybe what we ought to be doing is praying for and cultivating the kind of attitude where a gentle reminder is all that's necessary from time to time. And we can practice that letting go of things. That's why giving is important, I think. That's why, that might have made a big difference in the lives of these people, is if instead of lying back on their couches in their ivory inlaid beds and downing wine by the bowlful, they had practiced giving. They had practiced sharing. They had looked at the ways that they could affect the world around them and the society around them in a way that was righteous and just. And that's a discipline. That's a spirit. Giving is a spiritual discipline. It's not just something we do just to keep the lights on. That we do that too, but it's a spiritual discipline that helps us to let go of the things that we tend to find security in. Other comments, thoughts? What time is it? 8:15. We got time. So verse 9 then. If 10 people are left in one house, they too will die. And if the relative who comes to carry the bodies out of the house to burn them asks anyone who might be hiding there, is anyone else with you? And he says, no. And he'll go on to say, hush, we must not mention the name of the Lord. This is a notoriously difficult section. There's all kinds of competing understandings and interpretations and even translations of what's being said here. The idea seems to be that some survivors of the carnage that's about to come are found, and in the ensuing conversation, somebody says, we must not mention the name of the Lord. Why not? Why must they not mention the name of the Lord?
Because they think they're going to attract his attention.
Okay.
And what they don't know is that God knows everything.
I think the idea is God's not on our team anymore. We've got, what they're going through, their experience is telling them that God isn't pulling for them anymore. And so they better not be invoking his name casually. The idea of taking the Lord's name in vain, perhaps, comes up here. These are people who've not invoked the name of the Lord much, except in maybe a ritualistic kind of sense in a long time. And now that they're in need, and now that they're everything they have security in has been taken away, the attitude is going to be, God is a fearsome opponent, not a friend. Now, I don't think that that's what Amos would say. And in fact, we know the Lord has been telling them, I want you to seek me and live. Perhaps the question is, instead of just invoking the name of the Lord, are we seriously seeking him? Are we honestly, seeking him in our lives and seeking to please him and seeking to live in obedience and in grace and in relationship with him? It's a kind of a sad thing, isn't it, to imagine this situation where you can't even imagine that the Lord might be on your side. It's just gotten so bad. For the Lord has given the command. I'm sorry, say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't it like to perhaps that it started out with woe to you because of your complacency, and now you're in this fixed state, is that the woe to you is because we've displeased God and he's angry with us. And so we're not really thinking about changing. So why call on his name? Because that will incur more of his wrath. Because if these are God supposedly people, they would understand that they could repent and receive help. That's what Amos is calling them to. But it seems in their heart, reading this, that there's no intent to change. So we can't call on him because we just will incur more wrath or more of the woe to you for not being who you should be. And I don't know. It
reminds me a little bit of the prodigal son before the father runs to meet him. He's remember when he's going home, he's rehearsing his speech. I know I've sinned against you and God, and I'm not worthy to be your son. Just take me back and let me, live as one of your servants. That'll be better than what I've been doing. His repentance has only proceeded enough steps to get him to, I really don't like where I am right now, and I would really like to be somewhere else. But it's not proceeded enough to get him to the point of feeling like a restored son in his father's house. And so, he's in that middle ground where I know I need to change. I know, things have gone off the rails, but we can't invoke the name of the Lord. We can't call out to him just yet. So maybe that's where we are. Of course, the prodigal son, Jesus extends that story on to where it's not just the father says, yes, sure, come back and be my servant. It's, oh, hush, be quiet and come and let's have a party because my son has come home. Hopefully the people in this hypothetical situation here in verses 9 and 10 got to that point where they could call out to him. For the Lord has given command.
Who is Yahweh?
Sorry, what?
Who is Yahweh?
Yahweh is one of the names of God in the Old Testament. God has several names in the Old Testament. He's called several things. Yahweh is one of them. Some translations of the Bible use the word Yahweh. Some just use the word Lord instead.
Okay.
Yeah. Verse 11 then, for the Lord has given the command, and he'll smash the great house into pieces and the small house into bits. and I think it's interesting to note the big houses and the small houses, you know, the uptown, downtown, right? What's going to happen to both of them? They're both going to be destroyed.
Demolished.
The equality is coming, just in a different way than what God would have wanted. They'll smash the great house into pieces and the small house into bits. Do horses run on the rocky crags? Does one plow the sea with oxen? The answers to both questions is, do horses run up on the rocks? No.
No.
Do you plow the sea with oxen? No.
No.
And you should have also felt it was impossible to turn justice into poison and righteousness into bitterness, but you've done so. You've turned justice into poison and the fruit of righteousness into bitterness. What does that mean? To turn justice into poison, the fruit of righteousness into bitterness. What does that suggest to you?
Would it be talking against the law in a negative manner?
Okay.
It could go back to what we were talking about a couple chapters ago, the idea of like taxing everybody the same. So we're going to demand that the rich pay this percentage, but then we're going to go to the poor and we're going to demand they pay the same thing. And we're going to call that justice, even though to the poor, that's just really, really burdensome. It's this idea of, I think it's the idea of, you call it justice, but its impact is in fact not just. It's not right, and people would say perverting justice, right? That kind of thing.
I thought of the demonstrations after the Derek Chauvin incident. You know, that's one of the things I thought of. The demonstrations that we had last summer. I mean, what happens when justice is denied? There's bitterness. It poisons everything, and creates this world where you know there's just this bitterness always because justice is lost, justice is denied, and that's what they've done. That's the society they've created. Where there ought to be justice, there's bitterness. Isaiah 5, is it? I believe, the Song of the Vineyard. I wanted justice, and all I got was rottenness. I wanted righteousness, and all I got was lawlessness or something like that. God wanted a particular fruit, and he didn't get it. And there's, because of that, there's this judgment coming. For the Lord God Almighty declares, I'll stir up a nation against you, Israel, that will press you all the way from Lebo Hamath to the valley of the Arabah. The Arabah is the Dead Sea, and Lebo Hamath is Hamath is the nation just north of the northern borders of Israel. So that's from the northern extent of the Promised Land to the southern extent of the Promised Land. This nation that God is going to stir up is going to just tyrannize them and dominate them and oppress them throughout the length and breadth of the land. It was interesting. I was reading this today again and thinking about the justice that was missing in Amos's society, and I got a survey. If anybody wants it, I'll send it to you. If you live in Cook County, you can fill it out. I got a survey through the food pantry of how some of the money, the ARPA money that the county is receiving from the federal government should be invested in our communities. It's a survey that says, how do you think? And that's what it just asks. It says, pick three pick 1 to 3 of these areas in which you think this money should be invested. Arts and culture, childcare, climate change, digital equity, food security, healthcare, housing assistance, infrastructure, public health, public jobs, community safety, small business assistance, and other. That was just interesting to me as I was thinking about and reading what Amos says about justice, and get this email with this survey attached that's asking some kind of practical questions about how justice happens. How do we do it? And how do we as the church influence that and help in that? Anyway, it was just kind of an interesting little exercise for me to go through, and I could pick one. I think it was 1 to 3 of those areas, and select those. So how do I make that decision? How do we choose that? How do we prioritize those things? What's central? What's most important? And other questions, come up because of that, no doubt. But justice is a very practical kind of day-to-day activity. And we can't always make those policy kinds of decisions, but we can make choices about what do we prioritize, what matters to us. How do we live with the people around us in a way that will, instead of create this sense of security and complacency in what God has given me, how do we extend our concern to how to then share with those around us, and how to help create communities that are more just? And I think that's an interesting set of questions to work with that Amos asks us about. Complacency is counteracted by connecting with the people around us, and hearing and listening and serving and trying to respond to what we see, I think.
Well, that works, provided you haven't used your wealth to insulate you from the people and the world around you, which is pretty easy to do in America and in Chicago and the like, in which case you probably have a responsibility to try to break through that barrier that you've put yourself in, and find. You're going to have to be more aggressive, because God can't necessarily expose you as easily as he might others to what's needed and what the cause of justice is. Whether it's, and lots of things can insulate you, your economic status, your race, your culture, all sorts of things can insulate you, while some of those things can also expose you to issues. But sometimes I think you have to go looking for it.
You're probably right. I do think that part of it just comes from, though, being intentionally more aware of the people around you and connected to the people around you. And
that's hard to do in today's world.
Stretching beyond your what's comfortable for you. It can be hard to do. Yeah.
I mean, even if we're trying to do good, it's easy to do it indirectly through the charity, through a government agency.
Sure.
Those by themselves clearly don't work completely, or we wouldn't have any problems still. And I think there's a reason Scripture usually boils this down to a series of personal interactions too. That's really the way to make a difference. And I don't know if it's possible for us to do that on a monolithic level.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. I mean, not most of us, at least.
And that's really, I think, all we're called to do, instead of being overwhelmed by the problem at the macro level. We have to start with the smaller interactions that each of us has.
Yeah,
that makes it a lot more attainable.
I think you're right. I think you're right, and I guess that's what I'm kind of driving at. That we do that best in these interactions day by day, in which we do get out of what is easy and comfortable for us, and break through some of those limiting things. I was just struck by the reading Amos talking about justice, and then this survey saying, how do we equitably share this money? How do we equitably invest this in our community? Just left me thinking and left me wondering what do we prioritize and why? And in doing so, how do we sometimes overlook real needs and real struggles? I mean, one of the things that struck me was mental health. I don't have a mental health problem that I know of. Please, if you notice one, let me know. But I don't believe I have one. So that can be kind of for me, kind of something I don't check. I don't think about. And yet, I know very well in our community, some of the people that come in our food pantry come in because they have mental health issues and can't really function very well in society most of the time with the mental health issues that they have. That's a foundational thing that often there's not enough care for. Things like that. It just made me think, what do I miss? What do I overlook? And how can I be more aware of those things and more attuned to those things?
That one's hard because we don't fully understand mental health.
That's right.
As much as we want to learn, but there's so much more that's untapped with the brain.
That's right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate your thoughts and your comments, and the way you interact, and we will pick up in chapter 7 next week. Hope you all have a great rest of your week. See you, Ron. Bye, May. Bye, everyone.
Good night,
everybody.
Bye,
Good
everyone.
night,
Good
Patrick.
night, Jackie. Good night, Patrick.
Good night.